Turkey-Egypt relations. With us there are four experts on Egypt. The first speaker will be Mahmoud Hamad. He's a good friend of mine from graduate studies. We did study together at the University of Utah. And he is teaching at Drake University in the United States, but at the same time he has a joint appointment at the Cairo University. He was in Egypt 2 weeks ago. And here he is with a group of his students. And we are pleased to have him with us today. After Mahmoud, we are gonna listen to Numan from Sakarya University. He spent a year in Egypt as part of his doctoral studies, and he was there during the very critical period leading to the democratic transition and then also reversal in the process. Then we will move to Burak Bilgehan Özpek from TOBB University. Burak also studies Middle East and Egypt. He has been following the recent developments closely, especially the constitutional issues in Egypt. And after Burak, we will move to Mehmet Özkan from SETA Foundation. Mehmet also did spend some time in Egypt. He has been one of the early people to write a book on Egyptian transformation after the Arab Spring. So he does follow the regional politics. His expertise is on Africa, but he also follows Islamic politics in the Middle East and Egypt. And then I propose to give the speakers around 10 to 15 minutes each so that they could share with us their observations about the current state of Egyptian politics, how it may unfold. Then we move on to the Q&A session. Mahmoud, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks, Şaban, and it's a pleasure to be here today with such a caliber of scholar. What is going on in Egypt? The short answer is that nobody knows. The more complicated answer is that in the euphoria of the Arab Spring, there was the general understanding that something is changing in this region. One important fact to take into consideration before I delve into my presentation is that in Egypt's long history and in the region extended number of rulers, Mohammed Morsi, the now deposed president, is the first democratically elected president ever. So that was kind of a watershed event. Many experts, after such an overwhelming event like the Arab Spring, predicted either one of two conclusions. First, that everything is going to change. The second group predicted that nothing is going to change. In reality, both opinions are far from the truth. There are some structural changes that has been taking place in Egypt and some other Arab countries over the past few years, but there are still many things that remain to be the same. What has remained the same in Egypt, especially in light of the recent changes? When I say the recent changes, I mainly refer to the coup d'etat or the army intervention, however you want to call it, of July 3rd. The regime or the structure of government that was created after the coup or revolution of 1952 was based on a nucleus of power that combined the military, the security establishment, and the judiciary as the main foundations of the state authority. Mubarak and before him Sadat and Nasser were able to keep the three components of the state power in check. What Mubarak failed to do, especially what Gamal Mubarak failed to do in the last few years, was to keep the military as an institution happy. If you are familiar with Egypt, you would know that all of Egypt's presidents since 1952 came from a military background. Nasser, before him Naguib, and then Sadat and Mubarak. The grooming of Gamal Mubarak to be president threatened to basically undercut this unwritten rule of Egyptian politics. It also threatened to undermine the economic, political, and institutional power of the military. And that explains the behavior or the actions of the generals toward Mubarak and his downfall. In the past, since 2002 up until 2011, Gamal Mubarak was trying to build a new coalition to rule Egypt after the departure of his father. This new coalition, unlike the coalition of the July Revolution, was basically had two legs. The first was the business community, and the second was the state security. The army and army intelligence were marginalized in favor of those two institutions. And that made many in the officers' corps very unhappy with Gamal. They became really unhappy as well because the new emerging business leadership were threatening to undermine the extensive economic interests of the military. And they were not very thrilled to be relegated to a secondary position in the state hierarchy after the state security, the Ministry of Interior, the police. What has been going on ever since Mubarak's departure in February of 2012 is a realignment of the state power. State security is now under indirect authority of the military. The military is re-emerging again as the institution with the most power in Egypt politics. That being said, you can understand the last 60 years of Egypt history in one phrase. One coup d'etat, 1952, that became a revolution later because of the major socioeconomic changes, and one so-called revolution of January 2011 that is most likely going to degrade to a coup d'etat. The military is going to remain in the foreseeable future a dominant institution in Egyptian politics. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump up to the current constitutional referendum. If you focus on the main different changes, structural changes from the 2013 constitution, the 2012 constitution, there are four important major changes. The first change is to expand the institutional independence of the military. As per the new constitution, the Minister of Defense has to be selected with the approval of the military high command. The president has no control over the selection, has limited control over the selection. The second major change is empowering the presidency over parliament. Because, as everyone assumes, the next presidential candidate is going to be General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who is the commander of the army. So he's sitting the presidency for himself. The third major change is providing further guarantees of institutional independence for the courts and the judiciary outside the control of parliament. Because as you are aware, the court was very instrumental in bringing down the Morsi regime. The fourth and last major change was remove any legal obstacles for political participation of the former ruling party, the National Democratic Party. Under the 2012 constitution, leaders or the members of the former ruling party were prevented from running for office for 10 years. This is now gone, and those members are expected to contest and win a sizable number of seats in the next election. So what is going to happen in the next few months or years? Unfortunately, there is no good news to report. It is instability any way you cut it. The current regime produced after the referendum, which is most likely what is most likely going to happen in the next few months is a presidential election in April or May, where it's widely expected that the army strongman Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is going to run and win, and after that there's going to be a parliamentary election. What I think the institutions of the state, the deep state, if we want to use the Turkish terminology, is trying to do is to institutionalize a similar regime to the Putin regime in Russia, where the presidency is instrumental, is central, and the party system is very weak, allowing the presidency as an institution to dominate and overwhelm other institutions of power. However, Egypt is much harder to rule than Russia, especially with everything going on in the last 3 years. After Sisi, when he becomes president, and I say that because I don't think there's anyone who is following Egyptian politics closely, I have any doubts that if he runs, he's going to win. He has all the state behind him, all the media, all the business community. It's very hard now to wage any kind of electoral campaign in Egypt. Remember, during the constitutional referendum, any person who dared to either go say no in public was either accused of corruption, unloyalty to the country. Any person who tried to put a banner to say no to the constitution was imprisoned. So it was a highly unfair political process. I expect pretty much the same, maybe a little bit more relaxed during the presidential election. The problem is the day after he becomes president, because part of the coalition that brought Mubarak together, a sizable number of the young men and women who went to the streets of Cairo, Alexandria, and other Egyptian cities, were driven by economic feuds with the regime. Egypt has extensive economic problems, balance of payments, budget. It was remarkable to see the price of gas here in Turkey. In Egypt, the liter of gas is about 30 US cents. So it's highly subsidized. The government cannot maintain that. They have been running a massive international debt. Mubarak left about $10 billion of deposits since the Gulf War. Is already being consumed. The aid that came from United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia after the downfall of Morsi is already being spent. So such a level of economic activities and the state intervention is not sustainable in the long term. The problem is, if you take away those subsidies, you will affect the already beleaguered standard of living for the majority of Egyptians. If you are following the numbers, the IMF and World Bank estimates puts about 40% of Egyptians below the international poverty lines of $2 a day. So many of those people depend heavily on subsidy for food, on gas, and other basic necessities. You take those away in order to revitalize the economy that is going to bring social massive unrest. And that's why I say, while you can force certain political and constitutional framework over the society, it's very hard to maintain it in the long term. And I'm going to stop here because I'm already past the 15 minutes mark.
Thanks, Numan.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Şaban Kardaş and ORSAM for inviting me to this panel. Actually, I was gonna talk about. I was gonna start from the different part, but I'll continue from Mahmoud where he left. As Dr. Şaban said, I was in Cairo starting from November 2012 to July 2013, and actually the period I was there was the period that started. Actually, that led to coup d'etat in Egypt. So when Morsi took the decision of 22nd November, I was there, and that's when the protests actually were started initially, and then the protests grew into much bigger protest with the referendum of December 15. So in this period, actually, you could sense that this coup d'etat was coming, but even when I was talking to my flatmates who were working on a think tank in Cairo that was actually supported by Saudis, but they couldn't also imagine that the coup d'etat could take place, because many were talking that it was a transitional period. So somehow they could find a way. But nobody knew that some actors, external actors, together with some internal actors, domestic actors, they were planning this coup d'etat starting from December 2012. So this was actually kind of, as a person who lived there in that time, it was very visible that this was being planned, because many things, was really organized. And for example, you might heard probably during this time there was a petrol crisis, oil crisis, and this was even to the people, when I talked to the people there, for them it was kind of weird thing, because they never had such crisis, even though there was a very harsh economic problems there. Still the state was subsidizing the oil and electric and the bread and this kind of things. They never had such crisis. I mean, they had in the past, in 1970s and before, but in the last years during the Mubarak time, even many people live under poverty line, they still survived and they didn't have such crisis. So these things all came together. For instance, the oil crisis and the electric shortages. Like all of a sudden, electricity was gone. Like it happens a couple of times in a day, and even in some smaller towns, it happens like 6 hours, 7 hours in a day. And also water shortages was seen in Cairo also. So these kind of things to many in Egypt, it was surprising. And after the we realized that after the coup d'etat took place, we realized that these things were planned, because everything became normal after that, and it was really weird and absurd thing. So in my initial remarks, as a person who lived there during that time, about the coup d'etat, was I strongly believe that it was planned together with domestic and external actors. I will come to that, and it was organized by these actors. So this is nothing to do with the people want regimes fall, regime of Morsi fall. Okay, people want it, but if you read this, I also saw the probably you heard Tamerrut movement's paper, and I saw in the street people were signing up this paper. I took the paper, but it would never be the number that opposition is arguing. They were saying that we have 30 million signatures for this paper, people who want Morsi down. But this is of course impossible, because I mean you cannot get as big numbers, because many people cannot write or read, and many of them they live in the villages. And even like you might probably guess that Egyptians, okay, even though they like to talk about politics, they are not very much politically active. So I mean, this number of this Tamerrut movement's papers would, to my opinion, would be as high as maybe 5 million. And also the same is valid for the people who gathered on 30th of June. It is in some TV channels and some opposition reports. They say that we had like more than 20 million people. This is really, really the silliest lie I've ever heard, because even if you make a calculation of land and people who can gather in this area, there are some scholars they do that. They can only they can only gather maybe 2-3 million people to these areas of Cairo, Tahrir Square, and in this area, and also Ittihadi, the palace where Morsi is sitting. So these numbers are very much manipulated, to my opinion. And yes, Mr. Mahmoud said that in Egypt the current regime is trying to establish a regime like a Russian one, but what I believe is that this is very hard to establish, because Egyptians are not really like Russians, because they've experienced the revolution. So they came to the street and they opposed a very hard dictator who was ruling the country for 30 years, and they could topple this dictator. So regardless of who was supporting them and who was against, and but many millions of people were in the street and they toppled this regime. So but in Russia there is no such a culture of uprising and opposition. Okay, in Russia of course there is an opposition, and there are people who are opposing Putin and the regime, but I think it is the analogy is not really maybe valid, and in Egypt it would be very much difficult from now on to establish such a regime. But of course, military will be much more influential in the Egyptian politics after that, because we can see that in the constitution also. As Mahmoud said, a couple of articles. I've concluded a recent article for a think tank. I was comparing the constitutions of Mursi and Mubarak and the new constitution. In that comparison, I could see. Well, we could see that the military is institutionalizing its privileged position in the politics. I will now come to the articles that supports this argument. Yeah. First article is about the military trials. After the revolution of 2011, as we know that SCAF was ruling the country, and many of the protests against SCAF was related to military trials. So every time when the revolutionary youth movements were going to the streets and Tahrir Square, one of the main arguments of them was to prohibit military trials. So in this new constitution, the Article 204 actually allows that trials, and it's not doing it very openly. But if you read the article carefully, you can see that well, I will read the article now, maybe you will understand that. It's going to be very easy to conduct such trials. The Article 204 says that the military judiciary is an independent judiciary that adjudicates exclusively in all crimes related to armed forces, its officers, personnel, and their equals, and in the crimes committed by general intelligence personnel during and because of their service. Watch this sentence. Civilians cannot stand trial before military courts except for crimes that represent a direct assault against military facilities, military barracks, or whatever falls under their authority, stipulated military or border zones, its equipment, vehicles, weapons, ammunition, documents, military secret, public funds, or military factories, crimes related to conscription, or crimes that represent a direct assault against its officers or personnel because of their performance of duties. So this is actually, maybe you might heard that in Egypt, military is very much strong economically. They have lots of factories and lots of economic facilities. Maybe this is maybe employment in Egypt. Military's percentage in this employment maybe 25%, I would say, because these companies that are related to military, they are also considered as a military factories. I mean, you are a civilian, you work for a military factory, so any assault against you also considered, you can be judged in the military trial. And also all the military factories and ammunition, weapons, and many times, for example, if you remember Maspero massacre, it was in November 2011. There was Coptic Christians were protesting against the state TV, and then military intervened, and they killed a lot of people. But after that, the argument of the military was saying that the protesters attacked the military vehicles. So I mean, even like if you are protesting, of course you are protesting, and there are police and military officers you might attack. But since you attack the military persons and weapons and vehicles, you are being judged in the military trial. So this is I think also we have seen that in the constitution writing process, many of the youth movements and revolutionary forces, they were against this article, and they bring this up a lot of times. That's why actually many of them were against the constitution. Secondly, the military budget. This is another thing. As I said, the military has a very big economic percentage in Egyptian economy overall, and they wanted to exclude the military budget, right? The military definition of the military budget and everything related to the budget out of government control. So the Article 203 actually left this military budget overseeing. It was left only for the military personnel. So there is a committee which is consisted of many military members and a couple of civilian members. So this committee is going to prepare, evaluate, and accept the budget, and then they will do the auditing process. So you can see from this article that the budget of the military is very much out of government side, and this is a very big percentage of Egyptian economy, and this is of course not very much democratic. Yeah, and then there's another important aspect is the defense minister, appointment of defense minister. In the Morsi constitution, actually this was much more democratic, because the appointment of the defense minister was going to be done by the president. But in this new constitution, the constitution says, I didn't note the article, but it says that appointment of the defense minister needs the approval of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. So if the person who is going to be approved as a defense minister doesn't have an approval of the army, he cannot be a defense minister. So this is again another article that helps military to institutionalize its position in the political setting. So these articles shows, and many other articles show, that the military is very much influential in Egyptian politics, and it will be influential in the Egyptian politics. But there is something that make me think that maybe this process of revolution is not finished yet, because it is only this coup d'etat is only one part of the revolution. If we look at the study of the revolutions, in the past revolutions, we see that the revolution has many phases. So the first phase in the Egyptian revolution was the actual revolution, the revolution that took place in 25th January 2011 with the support of many different segments of the society and also other actors within the society. And this revolution was, in the first phase, it was successful because they forced the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to organize the elections, and then after the elections, the presidential elections took place, and then this was done. But in the second part, maybe this part, the first revolutionary forces didn't actually, or didn't play the game very well, because they couldn't see that there might be other actors in this political setting who are organizing an anti-revolution, or how you call it, another uprising against them. So they couldn't see that. They were maybe too naive to see that, or too good will to see that, but in any case they didn't see that. So the external actors, internal actors, who are mainly the old regime members and to some military and media and businesses, they were supported by the external actors. Each of them were supported by different actors, because all of these actors, they had one common goal, because their privileged position in the society, in the political setting, it was they were losing this position. So in order not to lose this position, for Saudi Arabia, this was maybe political motivation. Saudi Arabia didn't want Arab Spring to be successful, because if it was successful, they would be in danger. And we know that in Saudi Arabia there are many Egyptians living, and there are many Ikhwan-friendly people living. So Saudi Arabia was very much afraid that such an uprising spill over to Saudi Arabia. And so Saudi Arabia, maybe we have to look at back in 2011. The Nur Party was established with a large help of the Saudi Arabia. Nur Party is a part of Salafi group, Salafi movement. Actually, it's not 100, like it doesn't constitute all of the Salafis. It constitutes maybe 30–40% of the Salafi movement. So the other sections of the Salafi movement in general, they didn't support the army also. You might follow this also, because I was my flatmates and some people I met in Cairo, they were Salafis, and their think tank was supported by Saudi Arabia, but many of their members were killed in Rabia Adawiyya. So when you read in the papers that Nur Party is supporting the military, it doesn't mean that all the Salafi groups are supporting the military coup in Egypt, because that's how I saw it. When I visit the Rabia Adawiyya Square and Nahda Square in Cairo University, you could see that many Salafi groups, men and women with the civil people, they were against the coup d'etat. So we could understand it carefully, because there's a misperception maybe like all the Salafis are supporting the coup d'etat. It's not like this. And yeah, as I said also, is the society in Egypt is they have realized they have actually experienced the joy of the revolution. So what I believe is that maybe they will not accept the rule of Sisi or the military, and they will make another uprising. So Muslim Brotherhood will have a part in this thing, but of course they are in a very much difficult position now, because imagine many, like at least 10,000 people who belong to Muslim Brotherhood are in prison now. Many of them probably with no crime or nothing. So they will have a very hard time in organizing and continuing. But please don't forget that the Muslim Brotherhood experienced such things before also. After Jamal Abdel Nasser and Enver Sadat, they were being oppressed, but they were never disappeared. So because the Muslim Brotherhood very much embedded in the society, they are in everywhere actually, and this is really a very big part of the Egyptian society, and their existence will be there forever. But maybe we can say that Muslim Brotherhood will somehow transform itself into some kind of a more liberal form, but it's not like a European or Western style liberal form, but much more like a maybe AKP style or Refah Partisi style form. So last thing for the external actors. As we know that US and Israel especially, Israel's security is very much dependent on Egypt. Who is ruling Egypt is very much important for Israel. So that's why Israel probably behind the doors, they are supporting the coup without any hesitance, because this is, as I said, very much important for their security. And United States Middle Eastern policy was very much dependent on also Egyptian government. So United States, maybe to some extent, they were not really happy with Saudis supporting the coup d'etat that much, because United States usually initiate things in the Middle East, not the regional actors. Even when it is negative thing, United States was not, well, even if it was positive thing for the United States, they didn't like it when a regional actor was doing such a thing in the region. So, but we know that for sure that Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, these countries will continue to support military, because they are very much skeptic about the Ikhwan and the Islamist rule there. And Turkey, last word is Turkey will continue to challenge the system in the Middle East, the status quo in the Middle East, and it will again continue to aspire for regional leadership. This is not for only Turkey's interest, but Turkey considers the interest of all, not only for itself. So what Turkey is doing in the region is, in my view, is not only for itself, but for all the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Numan. Burak, in the meantime, you wrote an article, I guess.
Yes. It's very okay. It's very complicated. It's very hard times for the academia living in Turkey to discuss the Middle Eastern issues, because you might be in the position of discussing the Turkish domestic politics as well. So I should be very careful. And I will try to find a third way, I think. Neither CC nor AKP. Anyway, okay. When the Arab Spring began, the term Turkish model was frequently used by the scholars. The rationality was quite simple because Turkey has a unique character, and the question was as well very simple. Could a Muslim society with a democratic system be a model for the Arab awakening and Arab transformation? Accordingly, Turkey is a success story, and its experiences might shed light on the transformation of the Arab societies and Arab states. However, as of 2014, hopes turned into disappointment, and we have observed that there is a civil war in Syria, and there is a military intervention, coup d'etat in Egypt, and the secessionist movements gained ground in Libya, and social discontent in Tunisia. Therefore, on the eve of a new period, I argue that Turkey could still be a guide for the Middle Eastern transformation. However, instead of emphasizing the success story of Turkey, I think we should point out the failure story of Turkey in order to guide the Arab awakening. I wrote an article for Turkish Studies journal, and I examined the constitution making process in Turkey, and I did find out some patterns why Turkish constitution making process failed so far. So I think examination of such failure could be an opportunity for us to predict the future of the Middle Eastern societies. Very briefly, I think the first problem of the Turkish constitution making process was the absence of the grassroots support. The constitutional texts are organized, are designed by the elites. In 1876, the first constitution of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, was organized by some military and some intellectual elites. The same happened in 1908. And there is a tradition in Turkey, after coup d'etats we make our constitutions. In 1961 and in 1982, we prepared some constitutions in Turkey. And the methodology was quite simple. After the military officers take the office, they call some university professors from the Department of Law, and they order them to make some constitutions, and after the preparation of such constitutions, people are called to vote, yes or no. So as Sami Selçuk, a prominent figure of the Turkish academia and the Turkish judicial bureaucracy, says that Turkey is a state which has a constitution, but it is not a constitutional state. The second problem is the civilian authoritarianism, and I think it is the product of the 1924 constitution in Turkey. The single party rule and the Democrat party rule is the product of the 1924 constitution. This means that there is a difference between majoritarianism and the pluralism. If you get the majority as a result of election process, the civilian governments tends to violate the basic liberties of the civil society and even individuals. I'm not talking about the basic liberties of the majority, basic values of the majority. I am saying that basic liberties, basic rights of any single individual, such as right to assembly, right to press, right to express your ideas. Anyway, the third failure of Turkish constitution making process, the third failure that the Turkish constitution story produced, is the supremacy of the military. As a result of 1961 constitution, military gained an autonomous position in Turkish politics. By the help of National Security Council, as Ümit Cizre argues, that there was a shadow cabinet in Turkish politics. The main motivation of the National Security Council was the National Security Council is responsible to intervene any issue related to security. And any issue could be related to security. For example, the leftist clubs in universities, student clubs in universities, this is a security issue. Economics is a security issue. Ethnic conflict is a security issue. So National Security Council has right to intervene into politics, civilian politics, in order to avert the security threats that Turkey faced. I remember a quite simple example. During the 2001 economic crisis, the General Secretary of National Security Council, if I'm not mistaken, Tuncer Kılıç, said that you have paper, you have ink, print money. This is quite simple. And the fourth problem of Turkish constitution making story is the nation-state understanding, and this created some ethnic problems, such as PKK and the Kurdish question, you know the story. And defines the everybody is Turk who lives in Turkey, and there is an ethnic reference to that. It's open to discussion, but I just wanted to give the patterns, and the nation-state understanding gave rise to the ethnic problems in Turkey. Anyway, now we can start to compare with the Turkey's experiences and such patterns with the Egyptian experiences. These are the failure story of Turkey and the failure patterns of Turkey. So if Turkey will be a model for the transformation of the Middle East, the ruling elite, intellectuals, scholars, academics of the Middle East should learn the lessons from the Turkish experience. In 2011, the transitional constitution of Egypt, yes, gave some huge powers to the military. And 2012, the constitution of Morsi. We are observing a fact that the turnout rates are reducing. That means that the first pattern of the Turkish constitution making is be seen in the Egyptian case as well. It is losing the grassroots support. It's losing the grassroots support. That means that some segments of the society are being excluded from the constitution making process, or they are not they are not contributing to the constitution making process. I'm not interested in the causal mechanism why they are not going to vote. But the fact at the end of the day is they are not contributing to make a new constitution. Yes, 2012 constitution is a nearly perfect constitution. Basic rights, liberties, separation of powers, blah, blah. There are some problems, yes, I accept that. But the 2012 constitution of Egypt has produced some problems for some segments of the society. And we know such problems from Turkey, from 1950s, Democrat Party experience. And nowadays we are living in Turkey, and I am not saying my subjective opinions, and I'm not saying that this is true or not, but there are some criticisms about the civilian government which got the majority of the votes, and the people are accusing the Justice and Development Party of being an authoritarian. So we can observe the same pattern in Egypt as well. According to a report of the Cairo Institute for Human Rights, people are thinking that some segments of the society, no matter 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, even if one individual, one citizen feels that he or she is threatened or violated by the government, this is something in liberal democracies. Even one person, even one citizen. The Cairo Institute for Human Rights argues that the Morsi government violated the right to peaceful assembly, and the detention of journalists are a fact of Egypt. Excessive use of force is available, and such excessive use of force could result deaths and injuries. And the National Council for Human Rights are composed of the members coming from the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are producing some discourse including the hatred and the violence, and there is a pressure over civil society. This is a government which got the majority of the votes, and this is government which is the product of the rotation of elite principles, which is the basic pillar of the democratic theory, and it is violating the basic liberties of people, individuals. And we are remembering such pattern from Turkish experience as well. And now, in 2013, my colleague pointed out, and I found another article, 205. National Security Council is established in Egypt. This means that there will be shadow of the military in Egypt, and the military will not be able to, unavoidably, will not produce liberty and the freedom for the people of Egypt. National Security Council takes necessary measures to contain security and crisis. This means that if National Security Council wants to control the government and the politics, it has ability to create crisis and the security threats. That's why I understand from this article. So the question here is, if military regime is unavoidably authoritarian, by its nature of course, and if the civilian governments cannot produce basic liberties and they cannot protect the basic liberties of the individuals, what is the solution? I think we should give up looking for the solution in the constitutional texts. We should focus on how to create an independent, free, and self-sufficient individual in the Middle East, both in Turkey and in Egypt. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you have answers to Burak's ideal liberal quest.
These are big questions. I leave them to the floor. I'll try to be as brief as possible and touch some important issues here. First, what is the current situation in Egypt? For me, it's a lose-lose situation. Nobody can win, and it's unsustainable. It's true for both actors, military and then Ikhwan, both of them. Why? Because there is no political space for both of them. The fact that military every day is eliminating political space for Ikhwan, for a possible compromise. The latest being is the announcement of the Ikhwan as a terrorist organization. So situation is a lose-lose situation. Nobody is likely to win. For military, some of my colleagues mentioned, I mean, economy is collapsing. We are talking about 85 million people. Foreign direct investment is almost zero, and budget deficit is high, and financial support from outside will not be sustainable to run the state for long term. And at the same time, the coalition is separating, especially the youth and the military coup coalition. After 3 July, what we have seen, it is separating. So referendum happened at this point. So we should consider this lose-lose situation, lose-lose balance, and referendum happened at this point exactly. Usually after every military coup, all the referendums are either approval or rejection of the military coup. It was exactly the same in Egypt. It was a test for the approval or rejection of the military coup. But what happened? There was an environment in Egypt that saying no was almost equal to treason. Like it's an act against state. So in that environment, I mean, if you look at the result, only 38% of participation. I think it's a fiasco for military. It is too low comparing to all the conditions. I mean, having that there is no possibility for a no campaign. 38% is extremely low compared to 2012. There was 33% of participation in the 2012 constitution. If you look at the other indicators, most of youth did not vote. Especially even those who supported the military coup did not vote. Mostly elders, they voted. That's the information I gathered from the field. There is no research on that. And most of the Salafis did not vote as well. And mostly Christians, as a bloc, they voted for yes. So what you see, there is although it has been approved, and we knew that it would be approved, there is a lack of, still there is a lack of legitimacy in the eyes of many people. If you look at the feature of Egypt, maybe we can compare Egypt with little bit Pakistan, although my friend Numan compared it with Russia. Probably what we will see after this constitution, we will see a military running the show in front, at the behind, and civilians are running as a show in the front, in a democratically procedural election. So Pakistan element has three dimensions. Basically, one is the security is the main component, and all the actors, especially military, gain its legitimacy from the security. That's what they try to create now in Egypt, especially after announcing the Ikhwan as a terrorist organization. So more terrorism discourse and the war on terror discourse that will give them more legitimacy. Second, similar situation, financial support from outside. I don't know how sustainable is that in Egypt, because even the Gulf now slowly questioning the aid because they cannot really support for the long term. And second, with this constitution, we have seen that power has been dispersed between police, judiciary, and the military. So both all have, there's a military, there's a tutelage regime has been established, ineffective with this constitution, exactly. But for me, leaving these things, I mean, the main issue in Egypt is not political, it's social. Since the Muhammad Ali Pasha, Egypt has faced one issue, trying to balance its own triple identity. That has been the biggest case for its domestic politics, foreign policy, even economic relations. Egypt has three identities: African, Arab, and Middle Eastern. African, Arab, and true Mediterranean European identity. Each leader, they have chosen one identity over others. Nasser has chosen Arab identity over others. Enver Sadat and Mubarak has chosen Western identity over others. So it is now, especially with this current globalization process, if someone does not organize this triple identity in a coherent way and base its own politics on this triple identity, it will be failing. What we see now today in African dimensions, Egypt has biggest problem with the Nile water issue. In the Arab world, Egypt is not a key actor, is no longer a key actor. And with European dimensions, it's like sort of isolated from the Mediterranean European identity. So the biggest challenge is establishing this triple identity in a coherent way and producing a politics, domestic politics and foreign policy based on this. Otherwise, I think in the middle and long term, nothing will solve Egypt issue easily. There is also, if I say a few words on Turkey and Egypt relations, what I see, there is Erdogan and Sisi cul-de-sac in these relations. Even if Sisi elected as a legitimate leader in Egypt after presidential elections, I don't know how this relation will go. I doubt that. As long as both Erdogan and Sisi is in power, it will be likely to move too much. Maybe if there's a parliamentary election in Egypt, maybe there will be a parliamentary to parliamentary relations, but still it will be difficult because of this Erdogan-Sisi cul-de-sac. I see in the midterm it will be difficult for this period. But those who want to do something good to Egypt, especially any leader that has been elected, I think they should do two things. First, open Egyptian economy to the world, because in Egypt everything should be destroyed. What I mean by destroyed, I mean all the structure, economic structure, political structure, and all of them should be destroyed. If you open this country to capitalism, to neoliberal economies, very fast, that will destroy all the structure that has been established in the last 40 years. Otherwise, it will be difficult to establish the social ground that will support democracy and the legitimacy for any rulers. And second, to start to establish this triple identity in a coherent way. It's not easy in the short term, but maybe in the mid and long term, that will be key to define whether Egypt, will be influential in the region, whether Egypt will have a peace in its domestic regions. I think these are the key challenges that I see in the future of Egypt. And if we follow these 2 points, how they follow on this point, then we can see the future of Egypt in these lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I have the mic? Yeah. So let me ask a few questions of mine before I move to the audience. And based on Mehmet's statistics, I guess in 2012 you meant 53% participation, right? 33. No, 33. And then this current participation rate could be attributed to the boycott by the Muslim Brotherhood, and also taking into account one point Numan made about the experience of Muslim Brotherhood in terms of regime crackdown and recapturing the momentum and coming back time and again, this constant pattern of Egyptian politics. If we assume that this is going to be the case again, and if you look at the results of the referendum, what is your estimate? What would it take for the Muslim Brotherhood to recapture its strength and make its presence visible in the Egyptian politics? What's your own assessment? Okay.
That's the million-dollar question. The 38% is, first of all, highly doubtful. There were no real supervision or monitoring of the polling locations. The symbiotic relation between many of the judges and the military called to question the numbers that were put forward. However, if we accept it, it's still a very low number, less than about one of each 3 Egyptian citizens voted, and that's particularly low because the current regime had made it very, very easy for everyone to vote, even outside their electoral district. So if you live in Cairo, for example, and you're from Alexandria, this is for the first time you could vote in Egyptian elections. And the low participation is highly expected. You have, for a number of reasons. The first reason is there is basically a fed up with the political process. There, in the last 3 years in Egypt, we had, this is the 3rd referendum, we had 3 elections, and we are basically again back to square one. So many among the Egyptian society don't see any value of participating. Many among the youth, especially, as of course we don't have any scientific research on this, but many among the younger generation are fed up with the political process altogether. The second question about the Brotherhood, I think I might surprise most people here to say that the coup and what happened after the coup, the intense prosecution of the Brotherhood, is the best thing that could ever happen to the Muslim Brotherhood future. Let me explain. The Muslim Brotherhood was basically doing a pretty bad job running the Egyptian state for a number of reasons. The number of economic, social, and political challenges inherited from the Mubarak era are awesome for any capable government to do. The second reason is the Brotherhood was not able to make that transition from an underground organization, regardless of its political wing, where loyalty to the institution is what matters, to a governing party where expertise should be critical. Thirdly, the institutions of the states, which are the hands and tools that any government can use, basically were either hostile or indifferent to the Brotherhood. I have a number of friends who are in the security establishments and the police, and those guys were trained, socialized in the last 30 or 40 or even 50 years to think of the Brotherhood as the enemy of the state. It's not very easy for them to come and accept that you have a Brotherhood majority parliament and a Brotherhood president. So many of my friends who are in the police, especially, basically said after Morsi was declared the winner that we are on vacation for 4 years. If you as a society want to provide security, ask Morsi to do it for you. And that in addition to this, there were a number of, as Numan basically stated, there were, ever since Morsi came to power, there were regional and domestic actors that wanted him to fail. Now we know that I have evidence that it's not only since December of 2012, it's even before that. I have friends who were offered ministerial posts, and they are deeply connected to the security establishment, and they were basically told to decline. That is back in August, less than 2 months after Morsi was elected president. Because of all of that, the Brotherhood was not able to meet the increasing expectations of the Egyptian society. As you all know from reading history, after any revolution, especially after a longer period of stagnation, which we lived under Mubarak, many people have high hopes of the future. Socioeconomic conditions are going to change fast. Democracy is going to solve all problems. All of us who live in democratic societies know that democracy does not solve all problems, and that democracy just allows us to change our rulers, and democracy does not prevent us from making mistakes and selecting those rulers. So many in the Egyptian society were very much became disenchanted with the Brotherhood. And if the Brotherhood were allowed to continue its 4-year term, I think they would have not won the presidency again. Now, with all the persecution against the Brotherhood, all the bloodshed in the street, the cohesion of the group is strengthening. The support, the cultivated because of the socioeconomic activities. Remember, Egypt, like many other countries in the Middle East, which followed the Washington Consensus, the IMF-backed solution to economic problems, which by definition meant less state intervention in the economy and the society, removing the social safety net. That basically meant that government hospitals are not functional. State hospitals, state schools don't teach. And if you are a human being or a man or a woman with limited resources, you cannot go to the government hospital. The only thing available for you is to go to the clinic, which is usually run by an Islamic institution, Brotherhood or the Salafis. So those guys have political and social deep ties within each village and town in Egypt. And that is not going to disappear anytime soon. The government is trying to undermine this, but if the government undermines this, as they tried 3 weeks ago, that would mean that poor people cannot find places to receive medical care, which created a backlash. So the regime backtracked it a bit. So as I see it, the Brotherhood is going to re-emerge as an important actor in Egyptian politics. Political scientists, social science in general, usually refrain from making predictions because we're always wrong. But I'll make the prediction here. I would say that we're going to have a sizable Brotherhood representation in the Egyptian parliament in less than 10 years. So you can hold me accountable.
Okay.
I would like to add something about the numbers of the constitution. Just
okay, maybe a few numbers.
Dr. Mahmoud stated that the 38% participation in the constitution and the observation of the referendum was kind of regime sponsored, because before the referendum there were many think tanks applying to serve in the overseeing of the referendum as an independent observers. The High Election Committee defined three criteria for that. Thank you. First of all, it should be a legal think tank. Secondly, it should have done past experiences in the same field. And the third, this is very interesting, should not have any affiliation with any institution related to Muslim Brotherhood. This was official criteria that was defined by the election committee. So any group who have somehow any affiliation, or maybe not affiliation but any contact with the Muslim Brotherhood, couldn't have participated in that. So the funny example is the 6th April Youth Movement. This movement, as maybe you know, the two founders of the movement are in jail now, but in 30th of June they were one of the heavy criticizers of the Morsi government and one of the most important supporters of the military regime. They supported the coup d'etat, and then they realized that somehow, I even met Mr. Ahmed Maher a couple of times, and even he seemed to be a democratic guy. We invited him to Sakarya for a conference last year. In the end, he was supporting the military. We were shocked, but then he realized that this was a very grave mistake, because after military took over the power, they couldn't do any control or any influence on the military, so they were very much excluded from this process. So the election committees, the observation committees were really much military sponsored and old regime friendly. So this number of 38% quite controversial. Comparing to last Mursi's referendum, okay, it was 32% of participation, but you have to remember the environment of that time. In that time, starting from 22nd November to 15th December to the referendum, all the media except two channels, Tahrir, and there's another Muslim Brotherhood channel. So two channels were only the supporter of the constitution, but the rest of the media was very much against. And during that time, you could hear very silly news such as pyramids are being sold to Qataris and Suez Canal is being hired by Gulf countries, and this kind of weird news were really discussed in the TV channels every evening. And this was very much trying to manipulate this process. So even with this negative propaganda, the participation was 32%, and the approval of the constitution was about 70%, 66%. So it was totally democratic. Well, I mean, if you call it democratic, you can see even it from the numbers that if then Mursi was, like the regime now, he could have had maybe 95% of the approval rate. But they
previous Minister of Defense Tantawi, who was Minister of Defense for 20 years, would never appear on TV, would never give public statements, would never do anything that would make him even the slightest challenge to Mubarak authority. Sisi, since his first, month in office, would invite actors, media personalities, journalists, editor-in-chiefs to meet with him. He would go, and his news is going to be in the front page even before the president news. We have seen nothing like this in Egypt. He would go and attend military special forces exercises and run with the special forces guys and appear. I said he's trying to follow Putin not from way before. He's trying to create the idea of the strong man that Morsi lacked. And when I asked my friends who worked in the presidential palace, couldn't you have seen that? Because I know they are political scientists. The answer I received was shocking. They said that they warned the president a number of times, but Sisi used to go and pray with Morsi and cry and read Quran, and he sold him on the idea that he is a very devout Muslim. It seems ridiculous, because it is, but that is how Morsi did not react to the number of challenges from Sisi that any other president with even limited skills could have figured out that there is something wrong here, that the coup d'etat in the making. Remember, he gave back in December of 2012, Sisi, without consultation with the presidency, asked all the opposition parties to meet him in the Ministry of Defense. And then later the meeting was cancelled because of Morsi's pressure. Sisi started to appear on TV probably daily. A week before the June 30th, he basically gave an ultimatum to the president. You have 1 week to find out a solution. And if your Minister of Defense is giving you an ultimatum, that's a very bad sign, right? And then he gave him in July 30th a 3-day ultimatum, right? It was probably too late at that time. If you follow the news, the Ahram, which is the government newspaper, basically the headline, even before Morsi was officially deposed, was that this is the last day for the president. I said all this long answer because Sisi's previous position was the Director General of Military Intelligence. And if you know anything about the military, this is the guy who has all the files of the military personnel, who knows all their secrets and all the skeletons in their files, right, in their closets. And Morsi gave him the free hand to rearrange the military command. No surprise that the Sisi's successor as Director General of Military Intelligence was his brother-in-law. So the idea that there will be a high-level divide or division within the current military command is, in my opinion, unlikely. What Sisi did in order to gain the support of the younger officers was basically to raise their salaries more than 100%. give them more cars and more houses. And basically most Egyptian officers are career officers. They are not in the, they don't join the army to have a political aspiration. If you keep them happy, you provide them with modern weapons, and they are now happy with the current regime because, as I said, under the last 10 years of Mubarak, the military was losing power to the police. Now the military is back on top again. So I don't see any major threat from the military as an institution. And remember that any military cadet, before entering the military academy, they will examine his relatives up to the 5th level. And if you have any brotherhood member or brotherhood sympathizer, you will never be admitted to the officer corps. So that's pretty much like what we have here in Turkey. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
Well, thank you first of all for your thought-provoking remarks. Giray Sadık, faculty member. Well, my question goes to all panelists, but particularly perhaps to our Egyptian guest with his additional remarks. Already some speakers have compared the situation in Egypt with Pakistan, perhaps Russia, and some perhaps examples from Turkey. What makes you think that Turkey is of particular case of modeling, if you wish, in quotes, or of taking some lessons? To what extent you see some societal or political resemblance, and to what extent not?
Could we have another question? Yes.
Sevinç Ebru Temel. I'm a grad student at Middle East Technical University. I have two questions. The first one is for Mahmoud Hamad. As you know, there is a petition for the Sisi's presidency, and many prominent figures such as Amr Musa have given statements in this direction. What do you think about this? What's the signal for the future of Egyptian politics for the Sisi's presidency? And my second question is for Mr. Özpek. Even though the approval of the Egypt's new constitutions with a high rate, 98%, is it possible to form an estimate the future of Egyptian democracy process, the future of Egypt's democracy without Muslim Brotherhood? And I mean, isn't it a signal for the people, despite the people like Turkey under Kemalist rule? Thank you.
One more question. Okay.
İhsan Yağmur Şimşek, Bilkent University. How available now is the floor for Russia to increase its influence through Egypt in Mediterranean and both in Mediterranean and Suez Canal, both politically and economically?
Thank you. Maybe we'll start with Burak this time. Yes.
It is impossible to think about future of Egypt without Muslim Brotherhood, without Copts, without secular groups, without any groups, without any individual. So, in the contemporary world politics, we are observing a new phenomena. It is divided societies. Divided society is an old issue, old concept in political science literature, but we were defining the dividedness on the basis of ethnic, sectarian, or ideological dividedness. However, now in the Middle East, we are observing that there is also social dividedness, and how to create an orientation for the different groups in the same political system is a question mark. But I don't know the correct answer. How to create a venue in the state bureaucracy, in the state system, to get the people from different segments of the society together. But I know a point that excluding a social segment, excluding a social identity from the state building or the peace building or the democracy building process will not result positive outcomes, and they will not produce stability in a country. In regards to Kemalist regime, I think there are theoretical Kemalism and methodological Kemalism, and it is not an issue of Turkey. The theoretical Kemalism is now in the history, but the methodological Kemalism, how to govern, how to rule a government with the methods of the Kemalism, a huge state apparatus, and the huge interventionist attitude is a common characteristics of the semi-authoritarian regimes in the Middle East and in the Eurasia geography. I think that's all.
So I have a number of questions. The first question was why Turkey is a model. Turkey and Egypt are increasingly seem very similar. The idea of a divided society is very telling. As you have in Turkey, we have in Egypt a very strong divide between highly westernized elite and the majority of the population. And this elite, while small in number, much smaller than the Turkish elite, is very, very influential. Is in control of the media, state institutions, the military, and the business community. And they are much more westernized than the average Egyptian. The second similarity is, of course, the role of the military, which we already discussed. The third similarity is the role the courts played in undermining democratic process, which you are aware about what the Constitutional Court in Turkey and the other courts have done. The downfall of Morsi would have not been possible without the collaboration between the court, especially the Supreme Constitutional Court, and members of the state security establishment. When Turkey was perceived as a model, I think maybe it's less of a model because of what's going on right now in the last 2 months, but the AKP was perceived to be a model because a moderate Islamic party is ruling with a good economic record for about 10 years. Remember, most of the people in the Middle East are looking for economic opportunities. That is the defining characteristic of success or failure of any regime from Morocco to Baghdad. Political liberties are important, but the bread and butter is critical. I would, just to conclude, I would say that the Brotherhood experience in power is not like the AKP, it's pretty much like the Rafah party. They are trying to do too much, too little. They did not take into consideration, sorry, too much, too fast. They did not take into consideration that there is at least an institutionalized culture within the state institution that you are the outsider, you are the enemy, or at least there is indifference. The Brotherhood management of the different state institutions were at best lacking. Moving to the second question about the Sisi presidency, yes, there is a drive mainly by old regime loyalists to put the general on the ballot. I don't think he needs any encouragement. You don't launch or lead a coup d'etat to give power to anyone else. That is where just politics and history stands. He will run and he will win unless something massive happens that we cannot predict. He did not lead the coup and prepare the army. Yeah, that is not a secret, but he has been preparing the officer corps for military intervention for at least 9 months. And I know that because I have friends in those places. Many especially the young officers, were not very happy with how the SCAF led the transition process and how they had to basically face the anger of the young people in the street. They thought it's demeaning, and they thought that they should go back to the barracks. And the term I heard repeatedly, that we'll only come back to the political process when the people ask us to come under our conditions, which what happened in July 30th. About Russia position, there is many talks in Egypt, many anti-United States, anti-American rhetoric, which basically in the end will equal nothing. This is the first military command in Egypt history that is educated in the United States. The Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff. They have close ties with the United States. All the rumors about Russian military supply, strengthening relation with Russia, undermining the relation with the United States is basically for public consumption of the illiterate, 40% of Egyptians who don't know better. And just have to be blunt about it. The current Minister of Defense is in, I would say, frequent consultation with the Secretary Hagel. I would say they speak at least a week. And the fact that Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the Chief of Staff are US trained was instrumental in the United States approach toward the coup d'etat. Remember, in the United States we have a law that basically requires the federal government to cut aid to any country that, or any military that undermines the civilian elected government. The Obama administration was stopped short from calling what happened in Egypt a coup d'etat, not to trigger the economic stop of aid to Egypt. And they are going to continue to have strong ties with Egypt because, as one of my American friends told me, we invested too much in the Egyptian army to lose it right now. And they know that the army is going to remain, as pretty much like Turkish army, is going to remain the backbone of the state for years to come. So I'm trying to be very short in my answers.
Yes, you are indeed. Okay.
Thank you very much. I am Yaşar Yakış, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, and I happen to be the longest serving Turkish diplomat in the Middle Eastern countries. 4 years in Egypt, 4 years in Syria, and 4 years in Saudi Arabia. Apart from this, I am also founding member of the AKP party and one of the 6 persons who drafted the program of the party. So I witnessed from the first hand the transition of the ruling party in Turkey from an Islamist-rooted Refah party to something that could be called a secular party. So my questions are motivated more with this background. Of course, having served 12 years in the Middle East, and I also speak Arabic, so my observations may vary to a very large extent as compared to many observers in Turkey. And when I say it loudly, I receive dissenting messages in Turkey. When I said, for instance, that it is a pity that Turkey remained the only country in the world which still considers Morsi as the president and looks as if the Sisi regime is transitional, or it is transitional, of course, but it is going to fall very soon. This was not the case, and the time has proved what I thought at that time. I agree with all of the panelists who thought that Muslim brothers are deep-rooted in the Egyptian society. Even when they were banned, and when I was ambassador in Cairo, even when they were banned, they had something like 80 Muslim brothers sympathizer member of parliament in the Egyptian parliament. So they have roots in the society. For this reason, I believe that any equation that disregards this reality in the Egyptian society is misleading. You cannot uproot them. If you put more pressure, they will go underground again. But this time with the experience that they went through with the Morsi regime. So unlike in the past, they will be more resistant, like the microbes in your body becomes more antibiotic resistant if you take antibiotic unnecessarily in a irregular manner. So this is what is going to happen most probably for the Muslim brothers. For this reason, especially on my experience on how we carried out this transition from Refah roots to a secular regime, we carried out, at the time when we were establishing the party, a huge public opinion poll which covered 42,000 people. This is the biggest public opinion poll ever carried out in Turkey, and we tried to assess the answers and the expectations of the public opinion, and we based the future party that we were establishing at that time on the expectations of the people at that time, and we achieved a big success because of this. We avoided any reference to religious values for the sake of gaining the support of the secular or liberal regime. So I expected that Sisi was going to do the same, but to my surprise, Sisi deleted, as far as I know, Article 2 of the Constitution, previous Constitution, which provided that, I think it was something like this, the main source of Egyptian legislation is Sharia. So this was deleted as far as I know, and I was going to ask you now the question whether this deletion could be considered as a step towards secularism in Egypt, which is a very sensitive issue, because when I visited Egypt with a delegation of the European People's Party, chaired by the late President, who was the former Prime Minister of Belgium, Wilfred Martens, we visited all political leaders at that time in formation, all candidates to the presidency, and we also visited Pope Shenouda, late Pope Shenouda III. And we asked the question, what are their position regarding the Article 2 of the Constitution. With a few exceptions, they all supported of maintaining it, including Pope Shenouda. And he explained the reason to us. Now, if I understood correctly, Sisi went as far as deleting this article from the Constitution. So my question is again, whether you consider this as a step towards secularizing the Egyptian society. Second thing is, of course, everyone has the right to self-defense, including Sisi. Now that he is in power, he will take all measures possible in order to prevent of coming to power of Muslim Brothers, of any other movement which is close to Muslim Brothers. But in Turkey we have an experience which could perhaps constitute as an example for Sisi. In 12 September 1980, military intervention prepared a constitution, and there was an article 14 or 15 in this constitution which said that any wrongdoings or the members of those who carried out this military coup in 1980 cannot be taken to the court for what they have done during this military rule. We abolished this 30 years later and brought to justice Kenan Evren and the others. Some passed away in the meantime. So this is not a way out. I presume that Sisi and his group must have taken lesson from this. What is your assessment on this? I think this was the second. The other is not important. This was connected to. Thank you very much.
I'm Amira, I'm Egyptian. My question for Dr. Hamad, what is your expectations about the next 25th January?
Other questions?
So, thanks, Your Highness, for those very insightful comments. He did not delete Article 2, but he deleted other articles that is related to the... if you are not aware, Article 2 in the Egyptian Constitution basically declares Sharia as the main source of legislation. This article was added in a different version in 1971 Constitution under Sadat, as Sharia is a source of the Constitution, of the source of a legislation. Sadat, when he wanted to change the presidential term limit in 1980, changed it to the main source of legislation. So it has been in its current form for more than 30 years. And there is no Islamization of the Egyptian legal code has taken place. Basically because the government did not want to do it, and secondly because the Supreme Constitutional Court, the highest court, limited the applicability of Sharia principles to issues that there is no disagreement about. And as you know, if you know anything about religion, there are very, very few things in any religion that there is no disagreement among scholars about its meaning. So the Supreme Constitutional Court limited the applicability of Sharia in the Egyptian legal code. What the Sisi Constitution changed, which I agree it's more secular than the previous constitution, were two articles. Article 5, which basically prescribed under the 2012 constitution, gave Al-Azhar, the oldest religious institution in the Middle East, the ability to provide binding opinions on issues of controversy related to religion. This article was removed. This was one of the new things in the 2012 constitution. And they also removed Article 219, which tried to circumvent the Supreme Constitutional Court understanding of Sharia. So it tried to redefine Sharia in a much broader term in order to, basically it was put by the Salafis group in order to expand the role of Sharia in the future. Those two articles were taken off the current constitution. So you are right to state that there is less Islamization in the constitution of 2013 than the 2012 constitution. That being said, even if you apply the 2012 constitution, I don't think that any major legal changes would have taken place anytime soon. Egypt, like Turkey, is a society with deep roots, very complicated and complex, and any major change would have taken extended period of time. So there were my estimation in that there were no real Islamization under Morsi, and of course there will be no real Islamization under Sisi, but Sisi would continue to play the religious card. That is why he was keen in July 3rd to bring the Sheikh of Al-Azhar, the Ahmad al-Tayyib, and to bring the Patriarch of the Church of Alexandria, and to bring the representative of a Noor Salafi party to sit behind him when he declared the position of Morsi. That I have the religious support of those authorities. As for protecting the military high command, I think for better or worse, in Egypt, they seem to be more confident than Canaan Evren and his team. They don't seem to believe that they need this protection. First of all, they have the current, in the current constitution and the previous constitution, and in the military penal code, the provisions that military officers are to be tried by military courts. And as you know, in the Egyptian army, you cannot be tried before a court of lower rank. And because the Minister of Defense is at the highest Egyptian rank, he is one rank before the rank of Field Marshal, which only takes place during the time of war. I don't see any legal way that he could be tried for the human rights atrocities that has been committed since July 3rd. And I think pretty much we are not like Turkey, or pretty much like Pakistan in this regard, where the military today, in 10 years or 20 years, would be very hesitant to bring any of its high command to justice. It's like a protected zone. As for the question from my fellow Egyptian student, there will be major protest on the 25th of January, which is becoming very common in Egypt right now. Those who protest today, probably every Friday, are not only the Brotherhood sympathizers. There are many in the Egyptian society now who came to the conclusion that the military, the kind of regime that Sisi is trying to install, is no different from the regime that was installed by the July Revolution. President Nasser had an interesting way to put it. He basically stated that we gave the people social services and they gave us the right to rule. I think Sisi is trying to install something very similar. The problem is, unlike Nasser and unlike Putin, he does not have the resources to provide for the people. And as my fellow colleagues maintain correctly, the aid from the Gulf is not going to continue unconditionally and for an extended period of time. So at one point in time, I'm someone who objected to the coup, even though I had many critiques of how Morsi was running the country. But I want to see the Sisi as president because he's going to fail, and he's going to fail miserably. And people who supported them are going to come to the conclusion that the military has no magic wand to change the miserable economic condition of the country or to solve the social problems. So that's just my 5 cents.
Others? Enes?
May I ask a question, Mr. Özpek? My question is about the similarities between Turkey and Egypt. You mentioned about the failure of the process of constitution in Turkey. Do you think that Egypt will suffer from democratization process in the future or after that moment? And will Egypt leave the same things as well as Turkey, or the same thing or similar things or different? What do you think about that?
I really don't know the answer of the question. However, in line with the framework of the democratic theory, I should say that there are many indicators of a democratic country, and the elections, absence or existence of elections, is just one indicator. So the social dynamics play an important role in the building on democracy, and as I said that, and as Mehmet Özkan pointed out, that some economic and some social reforms that could pave way the flourishment of the rational individuals might contribute to the democratic development of the countries all around the world, and especially for Egypt.
Hi, I'm Craig Lesher, and I go to Drake University, and I'm currently Dr. Hamad's student. And my question will probably reveal that I am American. And it's, for any of the panelists, do you believe that there should be more or less outside country intervention? Like you said, Obama's administration has not considered this a coup d'etat, so they can continue to give economic aid to Egypt. Would you think that there should be more intervention from either America or any other country, or should this be hands-off and the Egyptians will be able to solve this themselves?
Yeah, that's a good point. Perhaps you could also here raise the issue of what Turkey could do, or how Turkey could, from that point on, adjust its policy, as Mehmet called it, Erdogan Sisi Kudasar. How we could overcome it? Perhaps in the last.
Go ahead, maybe I'll answer later.
Question as well.
That's an interesting question. How much intervention is optimal is always problematic, especially with the history of the United States intervention in the past 60 years or so. Unfortunately, and I say because I have been living in the US for 11 years, I consider myself at least partially American now, we have been on the wrong side of history in a number of cases. One example would be Iran. Remember, Iran had a democratically elected government in 1950. We in the United States orchestrated the downfall of Mossadegh, so it was no surprise when the revolution later succeeded, about 30 years later. The only embassy that was attacked in addition to the Israeli embassy was the US embassy. So history does not go in vain. So there is a heritage of US intervention to shore up authoritarian regimes. And I spoke to a number of colleagues who are in think tanks in Washington or close to the administration, and there was a discussion in the Obama administration about what can we do. And what can we do in order to preserve US interests, maintain Israel's security, and maintain the long-term relation between the United States and Egypt, which is critical to US interests in the region. And I think there were two, as far as I was told, there were two opinions. One opinion among the young generation of scholars in the Obama administration who basically said that we need to call things as it is. This was a coup d'etat. We are a country that supports democracy, and we should not commit the same mistake that we committed before when a government that is elected that is not to our suiting, and we basically try to undermine it. And I think this way of thinking lost out to the more bureaucratic, mainly Pentagon-led approach, which basically, I think, convinced the president in the end that the ties that the US military has with the Egyptian military is the backbone of the Egypt-US relations. And you don't want to alienate the military and lose their support in the future. And that's why you will see that the public discourse of the administration has been very wavering since July 3rd. Even with the number of massacres, and I call it massacres because that's what it was, human rights atrocities that were committed by the regime, the United States has been very, very quiet. If you couple this with the rhetoric that is basically inspired by the regime and its supporters for public consumption against the United States, I think the current regime is not going to be in the long term beneficial to a long, stable relation between the two countries.
Numan, would you like to add anything to
Well, actually, what I think is also very much parallel to Dr. Mahmoud. United States is making a big mistake, in my opinion, because as it was probably Condoleezza Rice when she was talking in Cairo, when she said that, I couldn't remember the exact phrase, but she said we preferred stability over democracy, and we failed to achieve none. I think that's what she said. And if they realized that they didn't achieve none of them, why they are continuing to do the same thing? So I think this is going to be negative for the U.S. prospects of Middle East in the future. This is going to have negative effects. So that's what I think in general. Yeah.
I guess there are maybe four types of involvement from outside to the region. If I categorize briefly, one is verbal support, the other one is supportive support, the last one's covert operation direct involvement. I think what we need in the region, whether it's in Egypt or any other country in the region, there should not be any covert operations or direct involvement. But what should be, what happened in the case of Egypt is that the West has even refrained of verbal support. What Turkey was doing in the old Middle East process since Arab Spring 2011, Turkey was trying to do a supportive support by helping institutional process, training the police and all the other issues. Maybe from now on in the Middle East we need either verbal support if they don't support at all, or supportive support. The others will be counterproductive, that will not be conducive for a better region.
How about Turkey? What would you say? I am trying to put you on the difficult spot.
What Turkey was doing, actually, as I said, is a supportive support. What Turkey can do from now on, I think Turkey should continue to have a role in terms of support what they are doing in mostly in Libya, Tunisia, but in Egypt the fact that the communication line has disconnected in a way, and as I mentioned, Erdogan, Sisi, cul-de-sac, I don't see any sort of direct political relations soon, but still society relation will continue to flourish, I think, in coming months and years. I don't think there will be any disconnect from that. But the main point is that maybe the support should not be considered cowardly, because most of the Muslim Brotherhood members in Istanbul. But what Turkey wants to see is a political space for both sides. Unless there is a political space in Egypt, it will be difficult for Turkey to involve and to open a diplomatic channel as well. For domestic constituency in Turkey, it will be very difficult to have a direct contact and establish diplomatic relation with the military coup. But as I see, in the midterm, I see if we see a political space in Egypt, then probably relations will go up again. I don't think that there will be any obstacle in that sense.
Okay, would like to add on? Okay then, if no more questions, we are gonna conclude the panel here. And then Numan has just finished a book on Egyptian revolution, the dictionary of Egyptian revolution. The book is just out. Here's a copy if you want to examine at the end of our panel. Outside there is coffee, tea. You are welcome to enjoy it, and you could also talk to the panelists in a deeper conversation. Thanks a lot, and hope to see you at other events.
Merhaba.
Aleykümselam. Evet. İnşallah daha sonra görüşürüz. Hadi. Sağ olun. Thanks a lot. Değil mi? Kopya olarak. Getirsen satar fikirleşlerle. Sağ olun. Sadece 1000 lira gibi. Bu söylediğinden